Good morning, dear friends. Today, my name is Laura Yerokesheva. I'm from Al-Farabi Kazakh National University's professor, Faculty of Oriental Studies. Today, we're going to talk about, to my view, it's a very interesting theme, the theme of intercultural dialogue, and how this dialogue and the seeing and understanding of the other took place in the history of Central Asia, particularly that we'll discuss using the artifacts which are preserved now, maintained and kept at the National Museum of Asian Art, Musee Guimet in Paris. And using these artifacts, we could see and we could discuss how the image of the other and how the cross-cultural dialogue and interactions took place in the history of Central Asian art. So let's start. The topic, the contents for today's lecture is, as you can see from your slide, is first we'll speak about the space and cultural historical areas. Then I'll just briefly touch upon the methodological stand which I use. Then we'll come to the general view and general history, general notes on National Museum of Asian Art, Musee Guimet, because as an institution, it played a very interesting and important role. And particularly then we'll come to the syncretism of Gandhara art and in Serindia, followed by the brief conclusion as well. So the first item, what is space? Space and cultural historical areas. It looks like for us, we just taken some notes concept as a granted. But when we come to the Central Asian particular region, it's as a space. Yes, it is, yet it was directly linked with particular time, with particular participants and events that took place there. So even the same area, let's say between Sirdarya and Amudarya rivers, could be called differently by different actors, participants in different times. Let's, as you see in the slide, like for the ancient Iranians, this place was called as Turan. For the ancient Greeks, as the Transaxiana or Transaxania, or for the Arabs as Mavaranahar. So the same equally, the huge Eurasian space, for example, for European travelers also look differently depending on the time, like Scythia, or where the Sakas or Scyth tribes lived, or Comania or Tartaria. So it means that Central Asia, as any other region of the world, comprises of various historical cultural areas, and it's unique for, maybe not unique, but it represents good case for understanding these cross-cultural interactions. Earlier I told you about the place between Amudarya and Sirdarya, yet there are so many other areas that could be distinguished as Turan, Bactria, Margiana, Khwarezm, Khwarezm, Sogt, Fergana, Zhechesu, Deshti Kipchak, Great Steppe, Mogulistan, Kashgar, Uiguria. In this regard, when we're talking today about Gandhara and Serindia, we could say that these cultural historical spaces areas were part of on the peripheries of Central Asia, as if framing the region from southwest and northeast. So, and this concept, Gandhara and Serindia, also reflect a specific time, space, and actors. For your convenience, I made some downloaded from internet this map of Serindia and Gandhara. This is, as you can see, the region around modern Peshawar and Jalalabad in Afghanistan. However, could be not confined strictly to that. It could the frames that could be extended to some extent. However, you could see that this is a meeting point between great mountain ranges of Tian Shan, Kunlun, Pamir, Western Himalayas. So at the crossroads of these mountain ranges, which by itself it's very important, I mean, to be located in these cross-border areas. It's so what we now call transnational area, but it is very symbolic. So on the territories of modern Afghanistan, modern Pakistan, and as for Serindia, I took a map from this digital archive of Toyobunki Ray books in Tokyo, and this map is taken and was digitized by the from the first volume of the book of Oromo Stein, Serindia. Here you could see a geographical location of Serindia as what we now call Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China, Chinese People's Republic, and the area which frames the Tarim, the so-called Tarim oasis, and in the desert area of that space. So as for methodological stand, let me briefly speak about the typologization of the main results of this cross-cultural interaction with the other. This typologization has been made by me based on the systems approach. And for example, when we speak about generally biological, individual, social or cultural systems, it came to me that based on Parsons' approach, it came to me that we need also to speak about these types of so-called interactions with the other. And when we see first the other, this type is characterized by the acquaintance and adaptation very well much as in biological system. Then we recognize, understand, and try to know the other, which corresponds to the individual system and relates to individual characteristics of the person. And while on the third stage, we go towards acceptance and amalgamation. It means when we socialize with the other, when the relational category is implemented here, when we become the part and the other become the part of our social groups, of some social groups. So at this stage, acceptance and amalgamation is very much profoundly highlighted. And on the highest so-called cultural level, we could expect the coexistence up to syncretism, when we don't see the other as the other, when we see the other as a member of the same solidary groups. So it means that the cultural patterns of syncretism and coexistence work on the highest cultural systems level. And exactly on this level, these cultural patterns are syncretic. I would call them like as if they're multi-layered in nature, and they're different in variety of symbolism, including various traditions and practice. And here, the perception of a cultural or religious other undergoes a transformation towards acceptance the other as an equal member of the solidary cultural groups. So let's briefly tell me about the National Museum of Asian Art, Musee Guimet in Paris, in France, because this became a very important institution for understanding and for studying, for researching, and for keeping and preserving as well. So that institution has been established by a French industrialist, Émile Guimet, in 1879 in Lyon, when he ordered special building according to his own vision. And then later this museum has been transferred to Paris. Here on the photo, I thought it would be good to show you the picture of Guimet, Émile Guimet, as made by his portrait made by 19th century by Ferdinand Luigi. And the museum contains collections from the very famous expeditions of Paul Périot in early 20th century, the collections of Edmond Chavin, the collections that had been made on the basis of the French archaeological delegation to Afghanistan, French expeditions in 20s and 30s, started from the Jules Hacquins in 1898, and then French expeditions to Afghanistan in the 50s, and of course of many donations as well. So as you can understand, this is a huge depository of all manuscript sources. And here you could see the photograph of Paul Pelliot when he was working in the Dunhuang caves in China, in Gansu province, and following Oriel Stein's discovery of this case, he in 1907. Here, particularly, the photo reflects his exhibition. His expedition in 1908. What is syncretism in general? How it could be traced? Let's first solve this on the sample of Gandhara art, which by definition is very interesting because it comprises elements of ancient Indian, Hellenistic, and Bactrian Parthian traditions, and it could not be understood without knowing each of them. So it also comprises the elements of even powerful inclusions and whole plots of ancient Indian, Buddhist, and Greek mythologies, and represents depictions of Buddha and Bodhisattvas, scenes from Jatakas, or stories of Buddhas, depictions of the local gods of like Panchika, Kubera, Hariti, Pharaoh, Ardoksho, local fertility gods, sculptures of Yakshanis, Gandharvas, Devatas, and stories following Hellenistic traditions about Dionysius, Hercules, or depictions of Atlantis. So this is a powerful combination, which it's like explosion, cultural explosion, which could not be passed unnoticed, and that had been represented very much and really powerfully in the following artifacts which are preserved here in this museum. Like in Gandhara art, as far as we go to the representation of bodhisattvas, you could see the very really powerful, up to very masculine depiction of bodhisattvas. Because when you go to the Indian or Chinese tradition, you could imagine and you could see absolutely different depiction of bodhisattvas as the defendants of faith, particularly of Buddhism. But in the Gandhara art, which flourished in the first, third centuries AD within the Kushan Empire, which Kushan Empire by itself was syncretic, because from Yuezhi coming from the north, from the local elements, also from Indian, and you could see that defense of the faith has been associated with the image of the warriors, which Kushans wore. And these warriors, you could, the traits of this defense and the warriors, you could see in the beautiful images of bodhisattvas, which could be kshatriyas, which could be also warriors by themselves, not necessarily bodhisattvas. For example, you could also see, let me put it here, the beautiful statue of the standing bodhisattva from Shahbaz Garhi, also from first attributed in 3rd century AD, or Common Era, which is a very bright sample of Gandhara art. And the clothes and symbolism of attire, which has this bodhisattva has, is very much manifestation of this syncretic synthesis of various cultures which had been originally interwoven together. Like here, for example, you could see in more details Indian robe with this flowing cape over the left shoulder, with the Brahmanic cord, which you could see here, with the depiction of the Garuda picture, bird, on the top of the turban. And yet at the same time, you could see here the depictions of the cupids or amurs, which has been found in Greek traditions, and from Greeks came to the European tradition as well. Him. And you could have this turban, which the characteristics fold of the clothing, and also a halo around the head of this. So, and in by its very powerful standing, its blessing position, still you could find that this blessing mudra has could not be attributed or found, for example, in other cultural space, let's say in India or China. It is particularly definition of the Kushan Empire, of the Gandharan art, as a mixture of, and it is a really defense of the faith, which for the local eyes, views, masters should be highlighted first of all. So in another elements of the syncretism in Gandhara art, you could see the legends about the ancient Greek gods, such as heroes like Hercules and Aeschylus, as well as Dionysus, which became very much popular in the region. We're following the campaigns of Alexander the Great and the subsequent disintegration of his empire into the separate state formation, which became later part of Maurya Empire of India. And from this perspective, India and Greeks became neighbors. So this gave huge impetus towards the art as well. And of course, cross-cultural dialogue. So I thought it could be useful to cite the very important work of Schwanbeck, who German author, who translated the Indica of Megasthenes and later has been cited by the European British authors who compiled this work together. And here Schwanbeck says that for Macedonians, when they came to India, in accordance with the invariable practice of the Greeks, they considered the gods of the country to be the same as their own gods. So they saw familiar symbols and meanings in the other, taken from exported from their own culture and incorporated in another one. So, for example, when they saw Bacchus, they identified him with Shiva, or because of this attire. And whenever, like he writes, whenever, or equally slightly, they identified Krishna, another god, with Heracles. And whenever, as among the Sibai, they saw the skins of wild beasts or clubs or the like, they assumed that Heracles had at some time or other dwelt here. Here you could see these legends of about the Hercules. This is the traditional depiction of so-called in European art, with this following depiction following on 12 labors of Hercules, when he defeated Nemean lion, and the lion's scales covering his head and his shoulder and his back, and with his clubs and or buttons or staff. So, but in Gandhara art, using the same symbol they once acquired, they have been transformed with this more softened forms. For example, here we could see legends about Hercules. Hercules became transformed into Vajrapani. Vajrapani was invisible companion of Buddha in his wanderings and preaching. But in Gandhara, Vajrapani, who was invisible, became very much visible, and the club or button of Hercules had been transformed into the Vajra. Vajra, which had been very much part of the Buddhist iconography as a symbol of strength of faith. So this, you could see how the symbolism became transported and adapted to local culture. So the same way when there is a story about of the meeting of the Buddha and Vajrapani with the mower or haymaker who offered Buddha the freshly cut grass. And here in the cultural barrelief, you can also see Vajrapani as companion of Buddha. Here he depicts in a more classical way, like leaning on his one posture on his leg and holds this stiff vajra. But vajra is depicted in a Buddhist style. And even the Buddha himself looks like a preacher warrior at the same with big mustache, with such a strength in his eyes. Here you could see that, for example, in European art, the elements of the depictions of Hercules became transformed to the depiction of Atlantis. Like you could see here in the palace near München in Bavaria, Germany. However, in Kushan or Gandhara art, you could see the same Atlantis, but in a very much adopted way, when they were from this bas-relief from Shari Bahlol in Peshawar, which is now in Peshawar Museum. The Atlantis looking with the left hand, only one left hand, not two hands, without seamless efforts, in a relaxed position, in a sitting and not standing position. And this very much depicts, takes us closer towards Indian depictions of more soft, of more gentle, polite so-called forms, rather than a strong warrior a depiction of this. That was about Gandhara. Now let's briefly go to the other part of the periphery of Central Asia, which is called Serindia, and where we could see the image of the other. So Serindia, according to Aurel Stein, comprised practically, as he depicts, I cite him, the whole of that vast drainageless belt between the Pamirs in the west and the Pacific watershed in the east, which for close on 1,000 years formed the specific meeting ground of Chinese civilization, introduced by trade and political penetration, and of Indian culture, propagated by Buddhism. So he took this phrase Serindia from a French scholars and says that this is excellently suited for the designation of this region. I would also say that if for Aurel Stein, Gandhara is the main interaction took place between Indian and ancient Greek civilization, while in Serindia between ancient Indian and Chinese civilization, I would say that we should not also eliminate the influence of Central Asian civilization per se on the local cultures in Gandhara and Serindia for this amalgamation. And that, because this is very important, because as a basic one, Central Asian civilization itself processed in common meanings and carried out so-called cultural assimilation and adaptation of new cultural meanings and bringing them to the common denominator and further broadcasting and consolidating them as a normative and then basic one. So Gandhara on the one hand and Serindia on the other hand were a kind of cultural products of this interaction. Here, we could say that in the middle of the first millennium, the art of Gandhara, like an echo still through the centuries, continued to influence Serindia as well. And so by the 8th, 6th century AD, there was a wonderful and sophisticated sculptures of bodhisattvas in diadem or with the laurel wreath on their hands, which had been found during the expeditions of Paul Pelliot in Tumshuk to Kusaraye. Like here you could see the heads of bodhisattvas or devatas from the Duldurakur, the state of Kucha or Kucho in modern Xinjiang, which are also depicts them as a defender of the faith. While by the beginning of the 7th century AD, you could see the other further transformation when the bodhisattvas from Tumshuk to Kusaraye are no longer warriors or defender of the faith from Hada or other places. Their features are extremely becoming lyrical, and their facial expression conveyed in very soft and so-called flowing manner. When you could see using even soft pastel colors, and statues and hairs are made using very earthy materials, in particular terracotta. So here we could see also the fragment of the mural depicting a sermon of the Buddha in a mural from the Duldura Akur in Kucha, also early of 6th century, where you could see the influence of Indian culture as well, because here in the depiction of the devatas or adorants, you could see them following the more Indian tradition, whether it comes to the depiction of the face, features, eyes, noses, or the attires. So the image of the other also could be seen from their influence of culture, which had took place in Tang Empire. It's in 7th and early 10th century, when these images, for example, here you could see the sitting woman in some head cover, which represents what today in modern Kazakhstan we call kimishek, the clothes and face which still could be found in rural places of the country. So that is the nomadic tribes which influenced also the Chinese culture, and with them Serindia particular. Or on the right you could see the statue of the Sogdian, who was carrying with his son, perhaps behind there was he was followed by the camel, and with some jars or pots and backpack on his back. And the other very interesting feature is the game of the pola, which is supposed to be originated in the nomadic spaces, where the usage of horse has been tremendously important for the economy of the people, and that was transferred to China and became very popular during the Tang empires, especially, as you could see from this photo, among the girls. However, here you could see nomadic representative from nomadic tribes, which perhaps following or perhaps showing them the rules of the game, or which have been nomadic tribes very famous for their horse riding art. So this is also very representative images of the other regarding the trade on the Silk Roads, also from the Tang Empire's period. And here you could see the depiction of the camel drive with all these wine skin or jugs and pots with the very beautifully depicted hair and fur of the camel. Here you could see the other representation image of the other that had been done, could be found in the burial grounds in modern Xinjiang, particularly here from the National Museum of China. These are Sogdians, which during the long marches on camel through the desert area, perhaps they were entertaining themselves to such extent that they could not stand or bear the dullness, perhaps, and the playing, the singing, even almost dancing. Where the representatives from other Asian, from other ethnic groups could be also seen here. So this here you could see another part of the panel which laid out on a funeral slab, which depict the scenes of from the life of the Sogdians, who are famous traders and who made a fortunes on the trade with China from Central Asia through Central Asia. And here in this panel you could see the festival of Navruz or Nowruz, which is very important festival, New Year, according to solar calendar, among the Turkic and Iranian peoples of the region. And here you could see on this also could be found in National Museum of Asian Art, Musee Guimet in Paris. So this is briefly coming to the conclusion. I would say that the cultural and historical areas of Central Asia, which are Gandhara and Serindia, became very important and very bright manifestation of cross-cultural interactions. And these manifestations could be seen for us using the artifacts which are preserved in the museums. And this artifact speaks about the very high level of cultural adaptation, coexistence, and up to syncretism. So it means it gives us very important conclusion on that the development of societies and social groups is impossible. It's never impossible without interaction of cultures, because and within this process, when we learn other cultures, it means the person learns himself or herself. So on this, I would like to finish my lecture, completing with bibliography, and of course would like to thank you for your attention, to thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak during this Sanskritotsav event, and hopefully that could give us the further floor towards not only understanding and interacting with each other, but also with implementing and doing and implementing and realizing this great potential which different people and countries have. Together we could do a lot. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.